Okay, so obviously this video is me reading my UC essays, but before I start, I just want to give a little disclaimer that it takes a bit of courage to read these pretty personal essays and post them up on YouTube where anyone can see them, especially people I know. So, for anyone watching this, whether I know you or don't know you, before you put any comments on this video, just remember if you don't have anything nice to say, then don't say it at all. So, that's all. And then, um, as for like whether these UC essays are like a good example or not, I don't know if I can really say, but I will say I got into every UC I applied to. That is, let's see, I got into UC Santa Barbara, UC Irvine, UCSD, UCLA, which is where I am now, and then I was waitlisted at Berkeley, but ended up getting in, but I didn't choose to go there. So yeah, let's get started with the essays. And I'm just going to like say the prompt, but then I'll have a full prompt written up on screen. So the first prompt is the educational barrier prompt or academic barrier. And yeah, let me read my essay. And also, the reason I'm reading my essays and not just like posting a link to them is because I really want to discourage like any plagiarism, even like accidental plagiarism, where like maybe like copy and paste in a paragraph of my work and you're like, oh, I just am like referencing this, and then you accidentally end up like copying bits of it. Like that it's not a problem for me if that happens, but it would really be a problem for someone applying. So I'm just gonna read them, and feel free to put me on ×2 speed to get through this video faster. So, academic barrier. As I stared at the application to be a robotics lead, the current leads flashed through my mind. Towering, confident, wise, boys. Was I the right person to apply for this position? Would anyone even listen to me if I was a lead? Logically, I knew I was at least somewhat qualified for the position, but a part of me still dwelled on the fact that there were no female robotics leads. I held my breath, then clicked submit. That year, I became the only female technical lead on the team. Throughout my term, I felt excluded when the male leads discussed issues without me. I felt hurt as I listened to jokes about my capabilities as a girl. I felt useless when my comments went unheard, only to be accepted when a boy repeated them. There were plenty of other clubs I could have been comfortably happy in. I began to think it would be better if I quit. But I knew I was capable, and I didn't want to let others' words and actions dissuade me from what I wanted to do. I realized that if I let the subtle sexism in robotics push me into quitting the team, I would never be able to stand up to the more blatant sexism I might encounter in the future. So I persevered. I began to sit at the very front of the room during leads meetings, so that when I spoke, I couldn't be ignored. I called out my teammates when they made sexist comments, even if they were friends who were joking. As I maintained my image of being a powerful woman in STEM, I started to embody it. I began to be more confident in myself and less affected by the misogynistic judgments of others. One day, a quiet little underclassman reached out to me, asking if she should apply to be a software lead. After resoundingly assuring her she should, I realized I was now in the position to encourage, inspire, and be a role model for other girls on the team. Okay, next essay is the, prompt number 6, I think. And this is academic subject that inspires you. Living in San Diego, I never see snow, so the idea of a massive, moving hunk of ice was fascinating to me. Learning about glaciers through Science Olympiad in middle school was what first sparked my interest in environmental science. However, taking AP Environmental Science, APES, was what really ignited my current passion for learning and applying sustainability. In APES, we learned about the impacts of meat production, the effects of indoor air pollution, waste management, and many other concepts, which made me change my perspective on everything from nuclear energy to where I buy my tea. I was fascinated by all these things that I didn't know affected my day-to-day life. I convinced my mom to buy a water test kit to let me test our tap water, and I chose to do my AP Statistics final on analyzing whether indoor plants decrease the amount of particulate matter in the air. However, the one thing from apes that had the greatest effect on me was a clip from a documentary we watched. I remember a beautiful little black bird fluttering across the flickering canvas projector screen in the dimly lit classroom. As I watched him flit from branch to branch, singing his mating call, hopefully waiting for a response, tears dripped down my face. That kauai-o bird was searching for a mate that he would never find because he was the last of his species. Now that bird is gone, and his species is extinct. I didn't realize it then, but it was at that moment that I became devoted to sustainability. I made a resolution not to buy any new clothes that year to mitigate fast fashion, instead choosing to thrift anything I needed. I also became vegetarian, reduced my consumption of single-use goods, and developed a habit of always researching the most sustainable option for anything I buy. At the UCs, I plan to continue my environmental science journey by trying to become vegan, working with existing organizations to reach sustainability goals, such as becoming carbon neutral, and promoting new methods of incorporating sustainability on campus. Okay, and then the next essay is, what have you done to make your school or your community a better place? So, identifying the differences between peridotite and olivine, estimating how many pounds of sand my boom lever can hold before it splinters into pieces, calculating the path of a glacier based on the crevices it has left in the ground. These are the timeless memories I made with my Science Olympiad team in middle school. I was disappointed when 2 years later I heard that the middle school Science Olympiad program was being discontinued because no one wanted to be the head coach. Without the Science Olympiad program, the middle schoolers wouldn't get the opportunity to make the same wonderful memories that made so much of my middle school years. Inspired by the work other clubs had done at the middle school, I suggested to the high school Science Olympiad leadership that we could try to somehow bring Science Olympiad to the middle schoolers. In response, they handed me a list of interested students and catapulted me into a newly made position, head of middle school operations. While it wasn't what I was expecting, I happily embraced the opportunity to be a part of creating someone's middle school Science Olympiad experience. In my new role, I began finding coaches, calculating t-shirt costs, organizing event schedules, and more for almost 50 students. Since there were no former head coaches interested in helping, I had to learn everything on my own. I spent many chaotic hours figuring out how to do everything that needed to be organized, from Megan's Law paperwork for parent volunteers to using Facilitron to book classrooms. My work has set up a strong framework for the future of the middle school Science Olympiad program. Now in my senior year, I'm training 2 underclassmen to take on my position next year. I hope that my initiative to involve the high school in the middle school leadership will allow the middle school students to feel the growing pride of watching their build succeed, the joyous relief of finding the answer they need in their binder, and the thrill of trying to identify a specimen before time runs out. And then my last essay is the creative side essay. So yeah, let's get into it. Cake. Small, flat, and covered in dripping, grainy frosting. This was the far from perfect cake my grandpa and I had spent hours baking. Since my grandma couldn't understand my broken Hindi, putting the time and effort into trying to bake a cake for her birthday was my way of showing her how much I cared. When my mom brought home a beautiful store-bought cake, I was devastated. Luckily, my grandma assured me that she loved my cake much more. Mine was the only one she'd eat. Macarons. After COVID, my robotics team was full of people I felt awkward talking to in person, since I'd only ever seen them over Zoom. So one afternoon, I showed up to the weekly robotics meeting with 2 large Tupperware containers filled with lopsided yellow macarons. While they weren't anywhere near perfect, they were sweet, our team color, and the perfect conversation starter. Sugar cookies. With an almost 7-year age gap, baking is one of the few things my sister and I enjoy doing together. As my sister has gotten older, we've advanced from making simple chocolate chip cookies to progressively more complicated desserts. We've even started a tradition that I've promised to keep up from college, baking spooky sugar cookies every October. Granulated instead of powdered sugar can change a cake from fluffy to grainy. A shaky piping bag can lead to differently sized macarons. Spending too much time in the fridge can make sugar cookie dough impossible to roll out. I used to think baking was about perfecting every factor to create a flawless result. However, I've learned that it doesn't really matter how good the dessert turns out. The real result is the smile on my grandma's face when she understands how much I care about her, the new friendships I make with my teammates, and my sister's laughter as we spend an afternoon together. While I've yet to master the art of baking, I've grown to love it because it allows me to connect with people in ways nothing else can. And that's all 4 of my UC essays. So I haven't looked at these since I submitted them in November last year, so it's been almost a year since I've read these essays. And honestly, I remembered them as being a lot worse than I think they are. Like, reading them, I feel like they're pretty good essays. I like reading them. But these essays took a lot of time and effort, and I know most of the people who are watching this are probably like in that phase of, being either a senior or a junior, who is going to have to write essays like these soon. And honestly, I think there's a lot more qualified sources on the internet to be getting advice from on how to write essays. But the one thing I will say is to find the balance between being genuine but also successfully presenting yourself in a positive light but still being genuine, if that makes sense. Yeah. The end.